Today is July 28th, 2015, Tuesday, and this interview is taking place at the Woodridge Public Library with Carl Palaver. He is a retired manager technician, previously working at Princeton, Argonne, and Fermilab. So let's begin with your earliest years. Where were you born?
Hazelton, Pennsylvania. It's a little mining town north of Philadelphia.
And do you know who was the first generation to immigrate to your family?
My parents. I'm first generation American.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Where did they immigrate from?
Actually, Southern Austria, which is now northern Italy.
Any traditions that they brought over?
Oh, a whole lifetime of traditions. I couldn't speak English when I started school, so. And of course, it was a large group of people that came here from there, all belonged to the same church and so forth. My parents went to the 3rd grade and 4th grade, so they weren't very well educated. They came through Ellis Island, the whole bit.
Do you have any stories about your parents?
Probably not all good. My father was a very difficult person. And my mother was not a very healthy person. She died very young. And when she died when I was a teenager. So I was pretty much my own as a young person. And they lived through the Depression. I recall the Depression, not as much as people who were in their 90s and 95s, but I was a youngster during that. I know the Second World War very well. My brother and I used to follow that very well. So did my parents, since they were European. And then my dad got a job at the Philadelphia Navy Yard, moved into the big city of Philadelphia, moved into a little apartment, 3rd floor apartments in South Philadelphia. And the reason we got the 3rd floor apartment was because it was the most economical one. Because the lower you go in apartments, the more expensive they are. I think that might be today the same way. And I still remember when we used to have an ice box, where the iceman used to carry the ice box up to your ice refrigerator. See, I'll go back quite a bit, don't I?
Yeah.
And it was rough because I, grew up in the city now. Basically, I was a country boy thrown into the city. And South Philadelphia is a really tough neighborhoods. I graduated from South Philadelphia High School and was out on my own when I was 17 years old. But it was good. I have no complaints. Everybody thinks it was a difficult life. Well, it was challenging, but both my brother and I think we proved we were up to it. So I went to tech schools and so forth and started working at a very early age. I was 12 years old when I started to work.
Where did you work?
I started to work in a drugstore. And what I did there was once a week, the druggist, started cleaning all his windows and doing stuff in the shop. Maybe more than once a week, 2 or 3 times a week, he'd wrap a money belt around my belly. And I'd go to the bank and he would take the money belt off and I'd go back with an empty belly because they didn't trust anyone else, they know who's going to do in a kid, right? As long as you keep your mouth quiet. I didn't even tell my parents I was doing that. So that was my first job. And then it was all kinds of jobs. I had to buy my own clothes after I started working. 12 years old, I was buying my own clothes. So you see, I was ready when I left the house. I was pretty independent.
What kind of work did your folks do?
Well, my dad was a sheet metal worker. My mom, she was just, a housewife. But my dad was a sheet metal worker. He learned that trade when he was in Austria. But he couldn't get work like that during the Depression. He went into coal mines for a while and didn't like it. I have 2 uncles that died because they worked in the coal mine before they were 30 years old. See, at that time, you go in the coal mine, you get paid by the cart that came in and out. So they would use all kinds of means of breaking up the coal and so forth, throw it in the cart. Well, it'd be awfully dusty, and they were all anxious to make money, so they would never wait till the dust settled, and they would breathe that in, and so they would get that black lung disease, which developed into pneumonia, and they would die. We used to play in the coal mines. There's a lot of abandoned coal mines in all parts of where any kind of mining. And my brother and I, we used to go into poke there because it was always nice, cool in the summertime. Coal mines stay at the same temperature year round. And it's usually around 58 degrees, 60 degrees. So we'd go in there and play in these coal mines. We shouldn't be.
And you could walk in, or did you have to take
Well,
the chute?
yeah, because these were mines that were done by what they call freelancing miners, and they would have them board them up, but we would crawl through the boards and go in there and make torches. And we were kids, we were having fun. It was fun. It was that, flying kites, and other things what we would do. My parents didn't care what time I got home; just come home for supper. The Europeans were very loose with their children, particularly those who were not well educated. The well educated ones, of course, they worried about their kids, and the less the education, the less they worried about. Just the nature of human beings.
Did your family attend church?
They pretended they did, but not really. Even though we did, this tight community with a church-going community, but I don't think they were very religious. Even though they would go to church occasionally and so forth. But
So there weren't any shrines in the house, or
no, well, not that I recall. I don't recall a lot of that,
Okay.
So you said you graduated from high school?
Yes.
Could you describe what your typical school day was like?
Oh, you see, at that time, it was right after the Second World War. I graduated in 1949, and there were still a lot of young people coming out of the service. And a lot of them had not finished high school, and so they were allowed to go back to high school to finish it at the time, right in the same high school. And when the high school started, it was a very large high school, all boys high school, South Philly at the time. And the classes were quite large, but 50% would not stay. They would get jobs and leave before, but I stayed full time. So the first 2 years were very difficult, and I was not a good student. But the last two were much better because all those that didn't care for school, they were gone. So you could say it was more competitive, but not really. It turned out I was happy. I graduated when I was 16 years old because I started very early.
Wow.
So it's a bygone era, as we might say. Oh, well, you say, wow, but it's just the way it was,
Why did you start high school so early?
Well, you see, my brother started school, and he was 2 years older than I was. And I missed him so much and cried so much that my mom couldn't take it. So she said to my father, and he was going to a parochial school, "Get him out of here." That was me. And so he went to the local priest or the Monsignor of the church, and the Monsignor church said, "Yes, I'll take him with 100 pounds of potatoes and a cake a week for the nuns." And that's what got me in school.
Wow. 100 pounds of potatoes and a cake a week.
A cake a week, that's right. Remember, it's the Depression.
Yeah.
Okay.
Was it hard to come by the potatoes?
Well, somehow they bought the potatoes. I guess my mother convinced them to get them potatoes, right? And so I think he talked about that for years. So I guess he didn't like the whole thing that he got. But and there was just so many youngsters in that class. Class must have had 60 or 90 kids in it. They were we were a mob. Poor nun.
So was that the lower grades, or that was?
First grade.
Oh, okay.
There were no kindergartens then. Just start first grade. That was it.
Oh, so there was a lot of cakes.
Oh, a lot of cake, right? Well, for the nuns, it was,
Yes.
it was a big cake, Mom. He said 1 cake a week. They didn't say 10 cakes or anything, I don't think they would afford that much.
Right.
But I do remember her decorating the cake all the time. And I do remember that if we were lucky and catch her before she put it in the oven, we could get some cookies, at the time, so.
Were you involved in like any sports during school?
Are you kidding? I was working. Working.
Were there anything like offered for the students to get involved in?
No.
Was there a particular teacher or adult that really influenced your life?
Well, yes, I would say there were two. One was a physics teacher. It was the most difficult teacher in the school. And remember, I was not a good student. And I barely was passing any of my classes. My brother was a very good student. My brother said, take Nelson. And he was a bald-headed person. And he used to call him Cue Ball Nelson. And I said, oh, he's so tough, I said to my brother. And he says, take him. Well, he was really good. And he had a method of marking that was, I never forgot. If you went to him every day, you got 25 points. If you did your labs, like in physics, you got 25 points. Well, you got 50 points. And then you had a little short exam at the end of every week. And if you can remember 1 week's work, you got 25 more points. Well, you passed already, right? So you got 75, and then your final, you get 25 points. So he was actually, I think, stress-free. And I thought, what a great way to mark. And he's the only teacher I ever had it was that way. And then my English, because I think not speaking English until, very well until I started first grade, and it wasn't too good then either. There was a lot of difficulty going through with my English. And the last year I was in, darn if I didn't come across a super good English teacher. Well, those were the two teachers that made a mark on me, the English teacher and the physics teacher.
Yeah.
And how do you think school now compares to them?
Oh, great, super. Oh my goodness, I'd love to go through the schools we have today, and all my children enjoy school. How can you go wrong with today's schools? It's just incredible. Particular, in the western suburbs like we have here in Downers and all of the western suburbs, and Woodridge and so forth. They're very good schools.
Did you see any racial tension or tension between ethnic groups when you were
in high school? Well, it was a rough school, and tensions. Certainly yes. The school had basically 1/3 Italian, 1/3 black, and 1/3 Jewish at South Philadelphia. Mm-hmm. And yeah, there was a lot of tension then. When I say that, but there were no shootings like today. Mm-hmm. A knifing was really something. A lot of fist fights, a lot of disturbances in the classrooms. I personally had about 15 fights in high school, and that wasn't as many as, there's always a fight in the hall. And guys just tumbled, no girls around there, just, a lot of energy. And the first couple of years are the worst ones. But then by your fourth year, it was a little calmer. Yeah, it was a tough time.
Yeah.
In that regard. But I went every day. It's not like you're afraid to go to school, whatever's going to happen, right?
So you didn't grow up feeling like you'd been bullied?
If I was, I didn't know it, because there were a lot like me. I wasn't the only one.
It wasn't just you.
It wasn't just me, right? So
it's funny.
So when did you actually move to Illinois?
The year of the big snow, which was 1967. Was that the year of the big snow?
I think,
I
heard,
think so. Yeah, the Argonne took care of my wife and my family and my children. They shipped me out. They wanted me.
Oh, good. Uh-huh.
Turned out good.
And was that big snow compared to Pennsylvania?
Oh, that was a bad year in Chicagoland that year. You know, in Philadelphia, where I moved from, they don't get as cold here. You get a lot of snow, but it turns into slush. So it's not what you call a nice snow. It's a yucky snow, it's black and yucky, you know.
Now, when you moved to Illinois, was that when you moved to Woodridge too?
Yes, no, moved to Downers Grove. Since I was going to work at Argonne, I wanted to be close to Argonne. Now, you got to recall, the reason I moved out here was because the project that I was on at Princeton, which was an experiment, a hydrogen bubble chamber experiment, well, I think it was like almost shutting down, and I think I was burning out. And I had some opportunities at Princeton to go on other projects. But the distance to travel, traffic was starting to get heavy, and I said to my wife, you know, what used to take me 25 minutes was now 3/4 of an hour. And I said, you know, we got to either move closer to Princeton or do something else. Well, I saw an ad in a publication or something that said Argonne wanted people like myself. And so I applied, and they had interviews, a couple of interviews, and here I am. And so we picked Downers, as I said, for the school system first, and the proximity to Argonne, and it was a good move.
What caused you to transfer from Downers to Woodridge then?
Well, we bought a little old bungalow, my wife, in Woodridge, and my wife, our children becoming teenagers, and she wanted a larger home, and we wanted to stay in the same school district. And I made a mistake myself personally. My wife said to me, you think I can sort of look for another home? Bad news. Within 1 week, we had bought and sold. See, I opened that crack, right? There she goes, right? So, and the same home that we purchased here in Woodridge was about $15,000 to $20,000 more than Downers, exact same home. So this was a better buy, and in the same school district, and it was a good move. We're still in that same home, so we have no regrets.
So what was it like here when you arrived here in down the area?
Cold.
Okay.
We got here at Halloween, and it was 70 degrees when we left Pennsylvania, and it was like 38 or 40 when we came here. And it just the first winter was not difficult, but it never. Chicago is much colder than the East Coast, most of the East Coast. So that was the most difficult thing. The first winter was the cold.
Okay.
But you survived the first winter. The second winter, I recall the first winter, and I was getting kind of depressed. But then I said to myself, I like my job. The school system's good, and so you had to get a frame of mind. This is going to be your life. And so it changed me. I'm going to work, say hello, hi, how are you? You have to, because I'm a manager. I'm directing people, so I can't bring my depression upon others, right? So that was it. I put a heater in my radiator, plugged in every night. So every morning I'd get out, my car was warm. I still do that. So you just got to go with the elements.
And how were your neighbors? Were they welcoming when you moved in?
Very conservative. Politically, this part of the world is, compared to the East Coast, is very, very, very quiet. They put up with a lot more here than they do back in the East Coast. I'm not saying it's good or bad, but they're just, when people in the East Coast, if there's an opening in the school board, there's a lot of contention and so forth. Out here, you can't even get some people to run for office. There's voids on your election ballots, but not in the East Coast. It was the cradle of democracy, right? And it's a lot different that way. It's very active back there.
You mentioned that Woodridge was more conservative. Did you think it was more safe because it was more conservative? Like, would you leave your doors open at that time?
Well, I don't believe that. I think it all depends upon where you live at the time. It's a matter of the community you live in. In Pennsylvania, if you live in an upscale community, if you want to use that name, it'd be the same as an upscale community here. That's just the nature of people, that's all.
And what was the racial makeup of your neighborhood?
Well, when I left Pennsylvania, you see, my wife and I, we first got married, we moved into one of the first racially planned communities in the United States. So we lived among blacks for 13 years, where my neighbors were blacks. But when we moved out here, Downers Grove does not have, when we first moved out here, I don't think there were hardly any blacks or any other type of less than Caucasian. So I was, I didn't come out here looking for a black community, but the one thing that I've seen change living where we are right here in Woodridge is Willow Creek School is the bottom of my street, it's a little elementary school. And I've been going by that for 40 years. And I've seen over the years how that become a really racially or
Diverse.
changed the school, which is, I think, is great. That's one of the big changes I've seen in the area of Woodridge. Probably all over DuPage, but particularly Woodridge.
And you didn't notice that when you came
Yes.
here from Downers?
Oh, I
that-
certainly did.
You did?
Oh, sure.
It was diverse then, too?
No, it wasn't diverse.
Oh.
Neither in Woodridge nor Downers.
Oh, okay.
If it was, I certainly didn't say it.
Mm-hmm. Okay. What?
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
What else has changed in Woodridge besides the diversity?
Traffic. You can go well aware of that. I mean, all the highways, Hobson Road was just a little two-way road. Now it's 4 ways, and of course all the large stores that opened up and down, and the shopping center out in Fox Valley, and also the one up in Lombard, they didn't exist, and so forth. So that's changed. In Downers Grove, there used to be a Sears Roebuck. That's gone. There was a hardware store there. Had been there for like 100 years. It's gone. That's changed. The traffic and the businesses, the type of business, and so forth. And of course, 355, right?
Yeah.
That didn't exist, and that's behind my house, not too far away, but
What about during the civil rights era? Was Woodridge and Downers kind of insulated, or?
Oh yes, still insulated.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just the nature of the Midwest, I think.
And things going on in Chicago didn't, reach here?
Well, you see, Chicago had a reputation in Philadelphia with the senior Mayor Daley. And of course, I lived in an integrated community. He was not very well liked. Mm-hmm. And so I knew of him and had heard of him, I talked about him and so forth. And he was considered by some to be a true racist, just like you would any other parts of the U.S. That have racial problems. Mm. But that's going back quite a few years.
So do you remember the Democratic
Convention? Oh, sure.
And
I was a young man then, sure.
where were you? Were you still in the East then?
Mm-hmm, yes.
So
Well, no, maybe not. I've got the years go by. I don't remember if I was in East or not. I don't remember. But of course, I followed it very closely and was aware of it.
And
Best convention Democrats ever had. Then you might say, well, it's terrible. And it wasn't terrible. What was going on at the time? Think about it. Blacks wanted their rights. Vietnam War's on. Women wanted their rights. I mean, it was a tempestuous time, wasn't it? And neither party wanted to give it to them. They wouldn't give Democrats a seat at the convention. And the Republicans were beating their heads on anybody who was against the war. I mean, it was so that eruption was not a negative thing. I think it had to be. I think it was for Democrats. It was a great convention. At least they exposed it all. The Republicans, they went down to Florida on an island and wouldn't let anybody out on it except special people, Caucasians, no blacks, no women. They said, look, no problems. Right? I mean, you got to take it at face value. And everybody says, oh, well, they're the guys we want in office because they're going to make the country like them. Well, it wasn't going to happen, was it? No. How you doing socially? You good here, am I?
Well, do you recall like any local scandals?
Local scandals? What do we have local scandals here? Where? In Woodridge?
Or in Chicago?
Chicago was you have to interview a person from Chicago. You see, there's one thing about Chicago. Even though we're close to Chicago and a lot of people work in Chicago, Chicago's problems are not my problems. And I can't solve their problems. And I can't go into New York and solve their problems, right? So if it's Woodridge, I'm interested in it. If it's DuPage County, if it's the Lisle Township, well, of course. But Chicago, I look at it with interest, but
nothing in like Woodridge that was very severe or impacting, spread around.
Well, I don't know. Do you guys know anything about Woodridge? Do you know who the first mayor was or anything like that? You haven't covered that. Do you know who was here before there were any settlers? Who were the Indians that were here first? I mean, that's the part you have to do that, right? You got to say who were the first guy?
Do you know Herb Nadelhofer?
Well, of course, everybody knows Neil. I was on the park district, and board for 12 years.
Okay, all right.
So,
Well, we're going to schedule him.
Oh, he's good.
In August, so.
He's good.
Yes.
You can ask him about the Indians.
Yes.
I hope he doesn't have hard feelings over that,
Well,
I don't know. Well, he had a barn out here, and they had a group of Woodridge, when I served on the Park District Board, and he wanted us to, or whether it was him or whoever it may be, wanted us to purchase that barn and repair it and bring it back to the whole history of Woodridge. Well, it was a lot of money to do that, It's that over a swimming pool. What are you going to do, fix a barn or have a swimming pool? Right? Decisions, priorities, right? Well, that particular board said, swimming pool. So you can ask him about the old barn, because it's one of those last old barns in Woodridge. Do we have a barn in Woodridge now? I don't know, Benny. There's one out on Green Road. Yeah,
but I think
that's
that
DuPage.
Naperville?
That's DuPage, Forest District, I think.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, were there like any other major projects that you remember that were being worked on?
Well, the big one and the most important one was water from the city of Chicago. I think that the county did a great job there, because everybody at the time, we didn't know how long the water here would last. You're in a well, and as the village grows and grows and grows, you use more and more and more and more water. Well, you're going to deplete that water, or it's going to become contaminated, or what? Well, when they put in the water from Chicago, that was a real plus. And all those softeners we all had to buy all the time, Mickey Mousing around with those saltwater softeners. The water's very hard out here, and lake water is not. So you don't have to have a softener to soften the water. And in order to soften water, you have to use salt pellets. And you have to keep on plenishing your salt plummet, So everybody got rid of all those softeners. I did,
Yeah.
And the other thing that's happening, of course, is as the rain goes down, it's just filling the well back up. So if we ever have a problem, eureka, there it is, right? So that's a plus too.
What else?
Oh, did everybody in the neighborhood like have a television in the house?
Oh yeah. When we came out here, it did, yes.
And everybody had a car?
One car, probably. Now they all got 6, I think. They're all over the driveways, aren't they?
They are, yes.
Every youngster gets to be 16 now wants their own personal car, And this is a very affluent area. Mm-hmm. We had a girl from Brazil, a student from Brazil, spent 1 year with us when my daughter was in high school, and she came back 10 years later and spent another year with us, and then came back and spent like 2 months with us. And she thinks this is like the whole US of A. It is not. It is not. The other thing that is really different than from the East Coast is when we drive up and down our streets here, you don't see businesses. Well, back in Pennsylvania, unless you live in a real wealthy area, you'd have 4 homes and a place that'll have a dry cleaners right out this little establishment there, or he'll have cars, or he'll do something. So you have this hush-hush of little businesses. Now that's sort of a charm in a neighborhood because you just go down the street to get something and so forth. But it isn't like the ideal pretty community, nice grass and but you pay a price for that. And taxes are much higher here than they are back east.
So tell us a little bit about, were you at Argonne longer than you were at Fermi?
Oh, no. Just 2.5 years at Argonne.
And then quite a bit longer at Fermi?
30 years.
Okay, so that's your... So what's the difference between those two?
Argonne's a multi-purpose laboratory. They do biology, maths, sciences. They do all of the chemistry and so forth. And Fermilab is just high-energy physics, particle research, high-energy physics, looking for the teeniest, smallest particle or thing in the world. They're looking for protons and neutrinos and all those, all that little stuff.
And so what were you doing at Fermi?
When I first went there, I worked on what they call a bubble chamber. And in order to see the particle, you fill a chamber full of liquid hydrogen. And when the particle comes out of the accelerator and goes into the chamber, that little bit of heat from the particle makes a bubble. And when you take a picture of the bubble, you're looking at the particle. And that's why they call it a bubble chamber.
Okay.
And the longer it is, the more you can see where it breaks and how it breaks. So they would like a chamber from here to California. You see where that particle ends. But that, of course, is very expensive and so forth. Mm-hmm. Now, Fermi, and the higher the energy, it's like throwing a baseball instead of a tomato. You throw a tomato against the wall, right? It breaks up. Well, if you throw a baseball against the wall and it breaks up, it takes a lot more energy, doesn't it? So it's the same thing with Fermilab. Fermilab had the highest energy accelerator in the world at that time. Does that help you? And then they have all these experimental halls where physicists come up with conceptions, ideas of what they think a particle will come out of that. A lot of math involved. Now the experiments are gigantic, big. When I came to Argonne, This was going back 30, 40 years now, whatever. The chamber there was $22 million. And I went to Fermilab, and the chamber there was $18.5 million. So they built, and that was 2.5 years later. So they built a cheapo chamber there, trying to do the same thing Argonne did. But they, of course, had higher energy, so they needed a stronger magnet. And Argonne's magnet was superconducting, but not as high in energy. The work I was involved in, myself personally, was the magnetism and vacuum, and of course the refrigeration of helium and hydrogen and nitrogen. I loved it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It was fun, absolute fun. I couldn't wait to get to work on Monday.
Did you ever bring your children to work so that they could see?
My son, who is an engineer now, had enough of high energy physics. When he was small at Princeton, I would take him into the control room and all that, and well, after a little while, he'd say, "Dad, I don't want to go no more," right? and I have two daughters, and neither one of those really cared for the sciences. So, like political science, I was out as political science major, and then got her master's in public administration. So it's good. It's a good program.
So do you see yourself as pretty well self-taught?
Oh yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm the last of those critters. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's the great thing about managing. You could study when you're a manager. You can't do it when you're a regular tech.
Yeah.
You have to perform a task. But I dictated the task, and when all the guys were gone, what did I do? I read about what was happening in the science world, particularly my world in science. And so I was really at the top of my curve all the time, and I still do. I still do, believe it or not. It's just interesting. I just found out, believe it or not, I was always curious on what is the vacuum in outer space. I never saw a number on it. And I finally saw one in a little article, and they said the moon's vacuum is 10 to the minus 11. And I figured, finally I saw a number. I didn't know if it was 18 or 10 to the 5, 10 to the, and I saw a number. All these years. Isn't that something? And they don't post things like that, just a vacuum, they say. Because what does the average person care about? What is the 5, 10, 20? They don't even know what those numbers are, right?
Yes.
But you can't, sometimes you have to really dig to get information or come across it or something like that. And that's something.
So where did you come across that? Do you recall?
I don't know. We all have our strengths and our weaknesses, and mine is gathering information and never knowing where I got it from. Some people can remember magazines' names, and I just information I have. But if you'd say to me, well, "What is it, Carl?" Well, I don't know. But I won't forget it because I never saw it before.
Well, in general today, do you get your information from print and magazines, or do you use the internet, or all of those?
The internet is I read the Wall Street Journal, the Tribune, Popular Science, Popular Mechanics, Bloomberg News, and as you get older, if you like reading, it doesn't go away. It gets stronger because you have more time.
Yeah.
You don't have the energy to do much else. Nobody ever cares what you're doing, right? So what do? You read.
Okay.
So, but I do clip things out for my children and grandchildren. Like I have a grandson who's in solar energy. So I'm just sending packets. I clip it out of magazines and send it off to him. And I have another one who's an electrical engineer. and he's in touch TVs. So everything I see on special material used for touch TV and so forth and all that, I clip them out. And I get a little packet, so once every 2 months I put it in an envelope, ship it off to them.
All right.
So you said you have 3 kids?
3 children.
And 2 daughters.
They're all grown up.
And they have their own kids?
I have great-grandchildren. I have 3 great-grandchildren.
Oh, wow.
Oh my goodness, you know. I have a 4-year-old, a 2-year-old, and a 6-month-old.
Do they all live like within the state?
You know, Colorado with 2 of them, and Sacramento with the other. They call me. You know, it's a strange thing too. It's just my own. I think all people experience this as they get older, is that they're so busy in their lives that until they get older, they don't really communicate very well. And as they get older, right, and they seeing life go by, well, then they start to communicate better.
I think you look a little too young to have great-grandchildren.
Oh, incredible, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's a decaying body, but not a mind. You laugh, it's the truth. The mind keeps spinning, you know. I think it's going faster now than it ever did. It's just, you know. There are so many interesting things going on. It really are. I don't think young people understand how much just fun it is to be alive today. So many interesting with communications. I mean, it's there. It's there. If you read, if you like to read. If you don't like to read, it doesn't matter what era you lived in. It's all the same.
So do you still stop by your work every so often?
No. You know, I stopped this year. For 15 years, they invited me back like 3 or 4 times a year for lunches. And I told them last time, it's over. It's over. You know, 50% are gone, or all new people. I've got to know the people who never worked there better almost the people who worked there. When you know, it's time to say to the guys, thanks, but no thanks. But I don't know if you've ever been to Fermilab? You never been to Fermilab?
I think I might have been there on a field trip before.
Oh, you should go. You should go because it's open to the public. And you go on the 15th floor there, and it's got a beautiful view of all DuPage, like all around DuPage.
I worked in the library briefly while I was in library school, the
Okay.
Fermi Library. Yeah.
Right.
It is. It's a great building.
Isn't that super building?
Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
And so it's unusual. We used to call it Disney World is the land, you know.
Yeah.
And I worked on the 12th floor for must have been 6 years, and the 11th floor for 5 years. And I worked out in the field the rest of the years.
So I think we've kind of covered quite a lot. Is there anything you'd like to add about any part of the past?
Well, I think it would be nice if somebody, and I don't really want to do it, but if somebody would have a sheet, like a small sheet like this, would have a block diagram, you know, who lived in Woodridge 200 years ago, and how many settlers were, and when was the transition, and then, you know, what was the body of government before it for each group. Well, that'd be nice. That'd be nice. I think that would go over well for residents of Woodridge, you know, to see what it was like here before all that. And, you know, you can expand that to the roads, the highways, the businesses and so forth. I think that Mayor Daley was a turning point for Woodridge. He brought in, you know, he annexed a lot of property here. He annexed all the businesses down and into International Highway and so forth. I think that was all great.
Okay.
And I think that'd be nice to see when he did that and what changes it made and so forth in the town. Originally, he wanted to, I think, make where the movie theaters are. He wanted to make that the sort of center of Woodridge. We'll make that town hall and everything over there. But the residents didn't take to that, so they liked it. They liked it just like this. So there's a change. It shows you the temperament of time. And I think that it's not because I served on the board, the Park District Board for 12 years, but I think that when people advertise Woodridge, they advertise the Park District, the library. They don't put businesses first or anything like that. You're trying to sell the community and say the educational and so forth, the high schools and the elementary schools and so forth. And that's not a bad thing. I'm just saying that's the way it is for Woodridge. Back east, they wouldn't do that. They would talk about business back there. They're more aggressive on business. They'd say, you want a job, you come here. Here, if you want a good school, you come here. Well, they don't say that. They'll say, job first, and then maybe a school, and maybe something else. I could see the difference in the character of that part of the world.
And you don't think it's changed in the East?
Oh gosh, I've been away so long, so I can't really say that. But I don't think so. I have a daughter-in-law in the East. She's in Boston, but she lives in Lexington, and that's almost like DuPage. That's another elite area. It's location.
It is, yes.
Right?
Yes.
I think that the one party government is not good for DuPage. If you talk about politics now, which Woodridge is part of, I think that if you had more people serving on the board, the blending of the board, the DuPage County Board, I think it'd be better, just healthier. I'm not saying they're doing things that are bad or wrong, but it'd be healthier. You would be less apt to have a scandal of any type when you have an open board. And the township, Lyle Township, says nothing, it's just worthless. It's just nice people, but it's strictly a way to make a few bucks.
They don't have any influence, really.
Oh yes, you got to pay taxes to them, so that's an influence, and also their cost for removing snow and doing roads is like a factor of, I think it's almost a factor of 5 times Woodridge's, so you know that they've got a nice job, they got a fat job, but the Democratic Party tried to, you can remove the township if you voted out, but of course all those people who were on the payroll there, when it came around for the election, all their families come out and keep it going, right? There's very poor turnout in between elections, and that's when they had it, so I think it would be, well, that's getting back into history, saying maybe townships were important 50 years, 75 years ago, before they had towns. When was Woodridge first a town? I don't know. When was it?
1959.
59. What was it before that? Was it a township? Was it just a county? Who took care of it? Was the police department? Was the sheriffs? Who were they? What was happening? ¿Qué pasa? And that's what I'm saying. If you have that block diagram, you look over and you can see the amount of people and the changes related to how they came about, why everything changed, and it's a matter of population.
Well, thank you, Carl, for talking to us today. We